Welcome to the Nerdy Dad Bodcast. I'm your host, Levi Bullard, or DM Dadbot on social media, and today we bring you the 12th episode of this series, and it is What is blank in D&D? A through Z. Now, if you're wondering, what the heck are you talking about? Well, what I mean is, I'm going to go onto Google, and I'm going to type in, what is blank in D&D? In the blank, I'm going to fill in A through Z. So we're going to have 26 options. And I'm going to answer what is the blank in Dungeons and Dragons. Now, as I don't want you to just see a screen and random words, and me having to type back and forth, I've already gone through and I've gotten the questions done on a sheet card down here, and I'm just going to go through and answer them for you. There are a couple that do not have any questions or were repeats, and I couldn't find a good question for it. I might make one up. If not, we're just going to skip over it. So that brings us to, what is a DM in Dungeons and Dragons? So a DM is your dungeon master. They're the person who controls the game as far as all the characters you're going to meet and interact with, and they're going to control the environment, the tempo of the game, all of what the enemies and everybody does. So they're everything aside from your character. So for B, what is a bard? A bard is a spellcaster who uses verbal or musical notes to essentially cast their magic. They could be a singer, a poet, a any type of musical artist, i.e., the famous lute players. But essentially, think of a wizard who uses spells focused through their music or their words, such as vicious mockery, where you essentially hurl an insult at somebody, and it does 1d4 damage as well as giving disadvantage to them on their next turn. C. What is CR in Dungeons and Dragons? Your CR, or your challenge rating, is essentially how powerful they say that you need to be in order to take on that monster. And that's assuming you have a party of 4 players. Now, if your party has more than that or less, you're going to need to tweak it. So CR is, honestly, what is CR? It's useless. So what is DC in Dungeons and Dragons? Well, your DC is your difficulty challenge. So how hard is it going to be to complete that challenge? To not alert the guards, to pick the lock, to remember that bit of information. Your DC will be set at a certain number that you have to meet or beat. What is the D&D Essentials Kit? So it's essentially a kit that has a pre-made adventure, some maps, a DM screen. It comes with the basic rule book, not the player's handbook, not to be mistaken by that. And I believe it has a set of dice in there as well. So it essentially comes with everything you need, the essential kit, to start playing D&D. Now again, you don't have to have the essentials kit to start playing D&D. It's not really worth it and comes with a kind of cheap but useful little module to run if you are interested in that or have never played. What is the final boss in D&D? There really isn't a final boss. It depends on what you and your DM come up with, what you guys decide the theme and everything of your campaign is. It could be anything from a barkeep that just went evil and now he's a super powerful paladin, or maybe you're fighting a god or Tiamat. Number 7, what Dungeons and Dragons game was in D&D? What Dungeons and Dragons game? Number 7, what Dungeons and Dragons game was featured in Stranger Things? Now, I think they mean what version, and that I'm not really sure. I want to say it was 2, so Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, or maybe 3. I don't think it's 3.5 yet. That's way too new. Because I'm not 100% sure, to be 100% honest with you, but I want to say they're playing Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. What is the highest level in Dungeons and Dragons? That would be level 20. There are ways to get around it and go up higher, but level 20 is the normal max. Number 9, what is initiative in Dungeons and Dragons? It's essentially the turn order in which you take during combat, how fast you react, and who essentially gets to attack first and who has to wait to attack last. It's very important in combat and can be the deciding factor on whether or not your character lives or dies. So get those high initiative rolls. So 10, J. We didn't have anything and couldn't find anything for J. This is the same with K. We couldn't find anything with K. So we're going to move on to number 12. What is a Lich in D&D? A Lich is a super powerful magic user who has transcended death and become essentially an undead spellcaster. Number 13. What is the most powerful creature in D&D? Now, as far as the most powerful, I couldn't tell you. Not trampling into the gods territory, I believe it would be the Tarask. It has a challenge rating of 30, and this thing it's an apocalyptic event. When one of these shows up, it is an apocalyptic event. So, aside from the gods coming down or things of that nature, your Tarask is probably your strongest beast. Number 14, what is N? I don't know. What is O? Octopuses. Octopuses are octopuses in Dungeons and Dragons. Unless you don't want them to be, then they're not. Number 16, what is a paladin? A paladin is usually a holy warrior in very heavily armored. They essentially have an oath to vengeance, conquest, revenge, justice. It could be an oath to anything, but the oath, that strong belief in your power, your devotion, is what brings you that power. It's not necessarily through a god, though it could be. It's through that oath to your specific tenant. That brings us to Q, which we don't have anything, and R. So, what is a rogue in D&D? Number 19. What is the strongest character in Dungeons and Dragons? I couldn't tell you. I'm going to say a level 20 character. Let's move on. What is a Tarask in D&D? Essentially, a Tarask is a gigantic, say, Godzilla-like creature that just has spikes coming out of its entire body. And like I said earlier, it's considered an apocalyptic event. If a Tarask shows up, it is destroying your entire town. It is leveling it. It is just a monstrosity to behold. And again, it's the strongest creature in Dungeons and Dragons, like beast, hands down. What is the undead in Dungeons and Dragons? It's exactly what it states, the undead. Somehow they have died and come back, but not as what they were. They're mere shells or wisps of themselves. You have ghosts, wraiths, specters, zombies, shadows. Actually, I don't. Yeah, shadows should be undead. Um, So that's essentially your undead. What is Vecna in D&D? Vecna is your archetypical lich. It's the most powerful lich and maybe one of the most powerful creatures in D&D to begin with. Um, the hand and eye of Vecna, which essentially were both chopped off when during his fight with his right hand man, cast the bloody handed. Um, During that, which the both hand and eye became legendary artifacts, essentially giving immense power to whoever wields it. Though you do kind of have to your hand off and place his on. But I mean, at what cost you gain so much power? We're gonna move off. What is the best weapon in Dungeons and Dragons? If you're going by sheer power, it would probably be the lance with the D12 or the not the warhammer, great axe. One of those, one of the axes, I believe, does a D12 damage too. Don't quote me on that. What is Xanathar's Guide in Dungeons and Dragons? It's a source book that gives you more information about classes, races, spells, items, abilities, things like that. That's what a source book is. What's specifically in Xanathar's Guide, I don't know. I do not own it. What is Y in Dungeons and Dragons? Why? I couldn't tell you. Why not? What is Z in Dungeons and Dragons? That one we didn't get anything either. So that's actually unfortunately going to wrap up our list. If you guys have any questions as far as Dungeons and Dragons go, because I know this was not a very extensive or informational list in any category, please drop them down below or on any of our social media, any of our posts to ask questions. In our Discord, you're feel free to join. All of our maps and characters tokens are getting laid on there, all for free. If you follow into the Discord, you can ask any questions you need. I'm on it constantly. So until next time, guys, what's your favorite thing in Dungeons and Dragons?